The morning sun shone brightly over Seoul National University as Jae-ho stepped out of the transport pod. His blue-tinted skin sparkled in the sunlight, and his large, dark eyes blinked rapidly to adjust to Earth's bright atmosphere. He was the first student from the stellar Commonwealth to join Earth's exchange program, and everything felt new and strange. Jae-ho checked his translator device one more time. The small silver disc attached to his neck had been programmed with all Earth languages, but he wanted to make sure it was set to Korean. He touched it gently and heard the soft beep that confirmed it was working properly. "Welcome to Seoul National University," a warm voice called out. Jae-ho turned to see a tall man walking toward him, wearing what humans called a suit. The man's smile was genuine and welcoming. "I am Professor Hanbin," the man said, bowing slightly. "I will be your mentor during your stay here." Jae-ho returned the bow, remembering his cultural training. "Thank you for welcoming me, Professor. I am very excited to learn about Earth." Professor Hanbin picked up one of Jae-ho's bags. "Let me help you with these. Your room is ready in the International Student Building. Your roommate, Do-hyun, is waiting to meet you." As they walked across the campus, Jae-ho couldn't help but notice how different everything was from his home world. On his planet, buildings grew naturally from crystal formations, but here they were built from materials like concrete and glass. Students walked around carrying bags and devices, talking and laughing with each other. "Is it true that Earth only joined the galactic community 2 years ago?" Jae-ho asked, trying to start a conversation. "Yes," Professor Hanbin nodded. "We were quite surprised to learn we weren't alone in the universe, but I think we've adapted well to the news." Jae-ho agreed. His people had been watching Earth for centuries, waiting for humans to develop the right technology for first contact. When they finally did, Earth had handled the revelation of alien life with remarkable calm. They arrived at a modern building with large windows. Inside, they took an elevator to the 4th floor. Professor Hanbin led Jae-ho to room 407 and knocked on the door. The door opened, and a young human with friendly eyes greeted them. "Hello, you must be Jae-ho. I'm Do-hyun, your roommate." He spoke clearly and slowly, though Jae-ho's translator made understanding him easy. The room was simple but comfortable, with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a shared bathroom. Do-hyun had already set up his side with pictures, books, and what appeared to be a gaming console. "I left the bed by the window for you," Do-hyun said. "I thought you might like to see the sky at night." Jae-ho felt touched by this thoughtful gesture. "Thank you. That's very kind." Professor Hanbin helped Jae-ho set down his bags. "Your classes start tomorrow morning. First period is Earth history with me." For a moment, something flickered across the professor's face. Was it concern? But it disappeared so quickly that Jae-ho wasn't sure he had seen it at all. "I'm looking forward to it," Jae-ho said. "On my world, we study the histories of all Galactic Commonwealth members. Earth will be the newest addition to our curriculum." Do-hyun sat on his bed, looking curious. "What made you choose Earth for your exchange program? There must be thousands of planets you could have picked." Jae-ho unpacked his clothes while he answered. "Earth is unique among all the worlds we know. Most civilizations follow similar patterns of development. But humans—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Humans are different. You advance so quickly, think so differently. The Commonwealth is very interested in understanding how your minds work." "Different how?" Do-hyun asked. Before Jae-ho could answer, Professor Hanbin looked at his watch. "I should let you get settled in. Do-hyun, perhaps you could show Jae-ho around campus later. The cafeteria, library, and other important places." "Of course, Professor," Do-hyun agreed. After Professor Hanbin left, Jae-ho continued unpacking. He placed his meditation crystal on the desk and set up his study terminal, which projected a holographic screen into the air. "That's amazing," Do-hyun said, watching the holographic display. "Our computers still use physical screens." "Would you like to try it?" Jae-ho offered. Do-hyun moved closer, fascinated. Can I? Jai-ho showed him how to operate the terminal with hand gestures. As Do-hyun experimented with the technology, Jai-ho noticed more differences between them. Humans moved differently, expressed emotions more openly, and seemed to have an endless curiosity about everything. Later that afternoon, Do-hyun took Jai-ho on a tour of the campus. They'd visited the massive library, where both physical books and digital archives were stored. The cafeteria offered foods from all over Earth, and Do-hyun helped Jai-ho choose dishes that would be safe for his biology. They met other students during their tour. Some stared at Jai-ho's blue skin and large eyes, but most were friendly and welcoming. A group of students invited them to join a study group, and a girl named Yoo-jin offered to help Jai-ho with any questions he might have about Earth customs. As evening approached, Jai-ho and Do-hyun returned to their room. While Do-hyun worked on some assignments, Jai-ho sent a message home using his terminal. He told his family about his first day, the friendly humans he had met, and his excitement about starting classes tomorrow. That night, as Jai-ho lay in bed looking at Earth's moon through the window, he felt optimistic about his time here. Everything seemed so peaceful and organized. The humans he had met were kind and intelligent. He was especially looking forward to learning about Earth's history in Professor Hanbin's class tomorrow. He remembered the professor's slight hesitation when mentioning the history class, but Jai-ho dismissed it. After all, what could be so concerning about history? His people had studied countless civilizations, and while each had its unique features, they all followed similar paths of peaceful development and eventual membership in the Galactic Commonwealth. Jai-ho closed his eyes and listened to the soft sound of Do-hyun's breathing from across the room. Tomorrow would bring new knowledge and experiences. As he drifted off to sleep, he had no idea that his first history lesson would completely change his understanding of humanity and send him running back to the stars. In his last moments of consciousness, Jai-ho thought he heard Professor Hanbin's voice in his memory, that slight catch in his words when mentioning the history class. But surely he was just imagining things. After all, how different could Earth's history be from any other world's? He would find out tomorrow, and nothing in his training had prepared him for what he would learn. Jai-ho arrived early for his first history class. The lecture hall was mostly empty, except for a few students preparing their study materials. He chose a seat in the front row and set up his holographic terminal. A young woman with long black hair sat down next to him. "Hi, I'm Yoo-jin from yesterday's campus tour," she said with a friendly smile. "Mind if I sit here? History isn't my best subject, and I could use a study partner." Jai-ho nodded, happy to see a familiar face. "Of course. On my world, we study history in groups too. It helps us understand different perspectives." More students filled the hall as Professor Hanbin entered. He looked different today, more serious. He placed his materials on the desk and turned on the large display screen behind him. "Good morning, class," Professor Hanbin began. "Today's lecture is special because we have our first stellar Commonwealth student with us. Jai-ho, your presence here will help us see our history through new eyes." The professor's first slides showed early human civilizations. Jai-ho took careful notes about the development of agriculture, writing, and early cities. This was familiar. Most species followed similar paths of early development. "Now," Professor Hanbin said, his voice growing quieter, "we move to a crucial part of human history, the development of organized warfare." Jai-ho's translator must have made a mistake. He adjusted the device, but the word remained the same. "Warfare." He raised his hand. "Yes, Jai-ho. Professor, my translator says warfare, but surely you mean cooperation or trade." A strange silence fell over the classroom. Professor Hanbin took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "No, Jai-ho. Warfare is correct. Throughout human history, different groups have fought each other for resources, territory, and beliefs." Jai-ho's large eyes grew wider. "You mean deliberate conflict between groups of humans?" "Yes," the professor answered. He changed the slide to show ancient weapons, spears, swords, and arrows. Humans developed increasingly sophisticated tools for fighting. Jai-Ho's blue skin paled slightly. Next to him, Yu-Jin noticed his distress and whispered, "Are you okay?" He couldn't answer. The next slides showed armies, battles, and siege weapons. His hands trembled as he took notes. This had to be some kind of mistake. No species in the Commonwealth had developed this way. Professor Hanbin continued, "The scale of warfare grew with human technology. By the 20th century, we had developed weapons that could destroy entire cities." The screen showed images of World War I trenches. Jai-Ho's terminal recorded everything, but his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Humans had intentionally created places designed for killing other humans. "Professor," Jai-Ho interrupted again, his voice shaking. "Are you saying humans chose to harm each other? This wasn't caused by natural disasters or resource shortages. Both of those things could trigger conflicts," Professor Hanbin explained carefully. "But yes, humans often chose to fight each other." The next section covered World War I. Jai-Ho's translator struggled with terms like nuclear weapons and concentration camps. These concepts didn't exist in his language. How could they? His species had never imagined such things. Yu-Jin reached over and touched his arm gently. "Maybe you should take a break," she suggested, noticing how pale he had become. But Jai-Ho couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on the screen as Professor Hanbin explained the Cold War, showing how humans had built enough weapons to destroy their entire planet many times over. The threat of mutual destruction actually helped maintain peace, the professor said. This strategy was called deterrence. Jai-Ho's voice was barely a whisper. "You maintain peace by threatening to end all life on your planet." Several students turned to look at him. Some seemed uncomfortable, others defensive. A student in the back spoke up. "It worked, didn't it?" Professor Hanbin raised his hand for quiet. "Jai-Ho, I know this must be difficult to understand. But human history isn't only about conflict. We also created art, music, literature." "But you kept the weapons," Jai-Ho interrupted. His translator crackled with the emotion in his voice. "Even after joining the galactic community, Earth still has these weapons." The professor's silence was answer enough. Jai-Ho looked around the classroom, seeing his fellow students in a new light. Their ancestors had done these things. They lived in a society that still maintained the capability for massive destruction. "Let me show you how these conflicts led to technological advances," Professor Hanbin continued, changing the slide. Many everyday technologies were first developed for military purposes. Jai-Ho stared at his hands, remembering how fascinated he had been by human innovation. Now he understood why humans progressed so quickly, fought so differently. They had developed under pressures his species had never known. The rest of the lecture passed in a blur. Jai-Ho's terminal recorded everything, but he barely heard the professor's words about the modern era and hopes for a peaceful future. His mind was filled with images of trenches, mushroom clouds, and stockpiles of weapons that could end worlds. When class ended, Yu-Jin tried to talk to him. "Jai-Ho, wait. I know this is shocking, but you need to understand the context." Context. Jai-Ho's voice was hollow. What context could explain this? Professor Hanbin approached his desk. "Jai-Ho, perhaps we should talk in my office. I can help you understand." "Understand?" Jai-Ho gathered his things with trembling hands. "I understand now. I understand why the Commonwealth watched Earth for so long before making contact. I understand why some members opposed Earth's admission." He walked quickly toward the door, his usual graceful movement now stiff and frightened. Behind him, he heard Professor Hanbin calling his name, but he didn't stop. In the hallway, other students moved away from him, perhaps sensing his distress. His translator picked up fragments of their whispered conversations. "Did you see his face during the nuclear weapons section? Well, what did he expect? Every species must have wars. Poor guy looks terrified." Jai-ho rushed outside, needing fresh air. The sunny campus that had seemed so welcoming yesterday now felt different. The buildings weren't just made of concrete and glass. They were built to withstand attacks. The students weren't just carrying bags. They were descendants of warriors. He sat on a bench, trying to calm himself with breathing exercises. A shadow fell across him, and he looked up to see Do-hyun. "Yoo-jin messaged me," his roommate said quietly. "Said you had a rough time in history class." Jai-ho's translator struggled to find the right words. Your people created weapons that could destroy planets. And you keep them. You keep them even now." Do-hyun sat down beside him. "We keep them because we're afraid of what would happen if only bad people had them. It's complicated." Complicated. Jai-ho's large eyes fixed on his roommate. "There's nothing complicated about it. Humans are capable of. He couldn't finish the sentence. Do-hyun reached out to pat his shoulder, but Jai-ho flinched away. "Don't," he said. "Please. I need to think." As Do-hyun walked away, Jai-ho activated his terminal. His hands were steady now as he began composing a message to the Commonwealth Embassy. The words came easily. Request immediate termination of exchange program. Reason: new information about host species requires urgent reevaluation of security protocols. Above him, Earth's sun continued to shine peacefully, but Jai-ho couldn't shake the feeling that he was sitting on a planet of hidden dangers, surrounded by people who had mastered the art of destruction. Dean Maire's office was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. She read Jai-ho's withdrawal request on her tablet, while Professor Hanbin stood by the window, looking worried. "He hasn't left his room for 2 days," Professor Hanbin said. "His roommate says he's barely eating." The dean set down her tablet and sighed. "The Commonwealth Embassy is concerned. They've never had a student react this strongly to Earth history. I should have prepared him better," Professor Hanbin said. "Perhaps started with humanity's achievements in art and science instead of warfare." A knock on the door interrupted them. Yoo-jin entered, carrying her tablet. "Excuse me, Dean Maire. I have the video from the history class." They watched the recording together. On the screen, they could see the exact moment when Jai-ho's understanding of humanity changed. His blue skin had turned almost white when he learned about nuclear weapons. "We need to help him understand the full picture," Dean Maire said. "Professor, please gather materials about human achievements in medicine, space exploration, and environmental protection. Yoo-jin, you've been friendly with Jai-ho. Would you be willing to talk to him?" Yoo-jin nodded. "I'll try, but he's not answering any messages." Meanwhile, in room 407, Jai-ho sat cross-legged on his bed, his meditation crystal glowing softly in front of him. The crystal usually helped calm his thoughts, but today it provided little comfort. His terminal displayed more Earth history. After the first class, he had started researching on his own. Each new discovery made him more anxious. The American Civil War, the French Revolution, the Mongol Empire, countless conflicts spanning every continent and era. Do-hyun entered the room carefully, carrying a tray of food. "I brought you lunch. The cafeteria had those vegetables you liked." Jai-ho didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the holographic display, which showed statistics about Earth's current military capabilities. "You can't stay in here forever," Do-hyun said, setting down the tray. "And you can't judge all of humanity based on our worst moments." Jai-ho finally looked at his roommate. "Your species went from first flight to landing on your moon in just 66 years. Do you know how long that took other civilizations? Thousands of years. Do you know why you did it so quickly?" Do-hyun sat down on his own bed. "The space race was part of the Cold War, yes. But look what we did with that technology afterward. We explore the stars now. We joined the galactic community." "With your weapons intact," Jai-ho said. His translator crackled with stress. Every other species had to give up their weapons of mass destruction before joining. But humans somehow convinced the Commonwealth to make an exception. Because we proved we could be trusted with them, Du-hyun argued. We haven't had a major war since. Since you invented weapons that could destroy everything, Jae-ho interrupted. That's not peace. That's fear. A new message appeared on Jae-ho's terminal. The Commonwealth Embassy had received his withdrawal request and was processing it. They recommended he stay in his room until transport could be arranged. Someone knocked on the door. Du-hyun opened it to find Yoo-jin holding several tablets. Jae-ho, she said, entering the room. I want to show you something different about Earth's history. She laid out the tablets on his bed. Each one showed a different achievement. The eradication of smallpox, the International Space Station, the development of renewable energy. Humans don't just destroy, she said. We create. We heal. We protect. Jae-ho looked at the tablets. Created with technology from weapons research, healed diseases that warfare helped spread, protected what your weapons threatened to destroy. Yoo-jin didn't give up. What about music? Art? Literature? Born from suffering and conflict, Jae-ho said. Your greatest works all seem to come from your darkest times. Even your entertainment is filled with fighting. Do-hyun tried a different approach. My grandmother survived the Korean War. She lost everything. But she dedicated her life to helping others and working for peace. Humans can learn from our mistakes. Jae-ho stood up and walked to the window. Outside, students were playing sports on a field. From here, they looked peaceful, but he now knew that many of those games had evolved from military training. Your people are endlessly fascinating, he said quietly. You create beauty from horror. You turn weapons into tools. You face destruction and somehow find hope. But that's exactly what makes you dangerous. His terminal beeped with another message from the embassy. They had arranged transport for tomorrow morning. Professor Hanbin arrived next, carrying more materials about human achievements. But when he saw Jae-ho's face, he set them down without speaking. I need to submit my final report to the Commonwealth, Jae-ho said. Would you all be willing to answer some questions? I want to understand. I need to understand how you live with this knowledge. They spent the next few hours talking. Jae-ho asked about their first memories of learning about war, how they felt about living in a nuclear-armed world, what they thought about humanity's future. Their answers were surprisingly honest. Yes, they were afraid sometimes. Yes, they'd wished things were different. But they also had hope. They believed humans could change, could learn, could grow. As evening approached, Dean Mireille visited. She brought one last attempt to change Jae-ho's mind. A presentation about Earth's peacekeeping efforts, humanitarian missions, and scientific cooperation. Jae-ho watched politely, but his decision was made. Thank you, Dean Mireille. This will be helpful for my report, but I still need to leave. We understand, she said. But please, tell your people that we're trying to be better. After everyone left, Do-hyun helped Jae-ho pack his things. Neither spoke much. What was there to say? Their species had developed along such different paths that some gaps might never be bridged. That night, Jae-ho worked on his report while Do-hyun slept. His fingers moved quickly over the holographic keyboard as he tried to explain humanity to his people. Humans are unique among known species. They developed not through peaceful evolution, but through constant conflict. This has made them incredibly adaptive, innovative, and resilient. It has also made them capable of both great destruction and remarkable creation. Their history is a paradox. They fight wars yet work for peace. They build weapons yet use the same technology to heal and explore. They face their own capacity for destruction yet maintain hope for the future. This report recommends continued careful observation of humanity. While they are dangerous, they are also. Jae-ho paused, looking at his sleeping roommate. Do-hyun had tried so hard to help him understand. All of them had. They are also capable of change in ways other species are not. Their very nature, shaped by conflict, gives them unique potential for growth and adaptation. This student requests withdrawal from the exchange program due to personal limitations in understanding human nature. However, I recommend continuing the program with better prepared students. Humanity must be understood if we are to interact with them safely. Final note: they are dangerous not because they are evil, but because they are complex in ways we never imagined possible. Jaiho sent the report and began his meditation exercises. Tomorrow he would leave Earth, carrying with him a new understanding of how complex peace could be. The morning of Jaiho's departure arrived with a gentle rain falling over Seoul National University. His transport would arrive in 3 hours to take him to the Commonwealth Embassy, where a ship waited to return him to his homeworld. Professor Hanbin had arranged a small farewell meeting in his office. Jaiho sat quietly, his meditation crystal pulsing with a soft blue light on the desk before him. Around the room, Dean Myrae, Yu Jin, and Do Hyun gathered for one last attempt to change his mind. "Before you make your final decision," Professor Hanbin said, "I want to show you something different." He activated a wall screen, displaying images of Earth's greatest humanitarian efforts. These are from the aftermath of natural disasters. Look at how humans come together to help each other. Jaiho watched as images showed rescue workers from different countries working side by side. His translator processed the statistics: millions of volunteer hours, countless resources shared, and borders open to help those in need. "I understand what you're trying to show me," Jaiho said softly. "But these disasters, floods, earthquakes, storms, they cause less damage than what humans have done to each other." Dean Myrae stepped forward. "That's precisely why these examples matter. We learn from our mistakes. We know our capacity for destruction, so we work harder to create and preserve." Jaiho's large eyes reflected the changing images on the screen. "Yesterday, I found something in your historical archives, something called the Christmas Truce from your First World War. Can you explain this to me?" The room grew quiet. Professor Hanbin nodded slowly. "In 1914, during one of humanity's darkest conflicts, soldiers from both sides stopped fighting on Christmas Day. They sang together, shared food, and even played football. That's what confuses me the most," Jaiho said, his translator struggling to convey his emotion. "In the middle of organized killing, humans suddenly decided to be kind to each other. Then they went back to fighting the next day. How can any species be so contradictory?" Yu Jin moved closer to Jaiho's chair. "That's what makes us human. We can be both terrible and wonderful, often at the same time." "Exactly," Jaiho replied. "And that's why I have to leave." He stood and walked to the window, watching the rain fall on the campus. Students hurried between buildings, holding umbrellas or running through the drops. Each one carried within them this capacity for both creation and destruction that so confused him. "My people have a saying," Jaiho continued. "The crystal that glows brightest leads others to clarity. We believe in being examples of peace and wisdom. But humans, you contain multitudes. You are not crystals with single clear purposes. You are more like your weather, capable of both nurturing rain and devastating storms." Do Hyun joined him at the window. "Is that really so bad? Being complex, having different sides to our nature?" Jaiho turned to face his roommate. "It's not bad. It's fascinating. And terrifying. In just 3 days, I've learned more about the nature of existence than in all my previous studies. But I'm not prepared for this knowledge. No one in the Commonwealth is." He returned to his seat and activated his terminal. The holographic display showed his travel arrangements and final report. The Commonwealth built its peace over thousands of years of gradual development. But humans, you compress the same amount of development into centuries. You experienced more change, more conflict, and more growth in your short history than most species do in millennia. Professor Hanbin leaned forward. "Surely that's an argument for staying. There's so much more to learn about us." "There is," Jaiho agreed, "but not by me. Not now. I've requested that the Commonwealth send different observers, ones better prepared for the complexity of human nature, ones who can understand your capacity for both good and evil without being overwhelmed by it." Dean Myray checked her tablet. The transport will be here in 2 hours. Is there anything we can do to make your departure easier? Jaiho's crystal pulsed brighter. Yes. I would like to visit your library one last time. There's something I need to understand before I leave. They walked together through the rain to the library. Inside, Jaiho moved purposefully through the shelves until he found what he was looking for, a section on human philosophy. These books, he said, running his blue fingers along the spines. They show that humans don't just act. They think deeply about their actions. You question yourselves. You struggle with your nature. Most species accept what they are, but humans constantly ask what you could be. He selected several books and began scanning them with his terminal, storing their contents for later study. The others watched in silence as he moved from shelf to shelf, collecting human thoughts about morality, ethics, and the nature of good and evil. Your philosophers asked questions my people never thought to ask, Jaiho explained as he worked. Questions about justice, about the right to use force, about the balance between security and freedom. We never needed to ask these questions because we never faced these challenges. Yu Jin helped him reach a book on a high shelf. Will you study these when you return home? Yes, Jaiho said. I need to understand how humans think about themselves before I can understand how you act. Your capacity for self-reflection is as remarkable as your capacity for conflict. As the morning wore on, they helped Jaiho gather materials about human art, music, and literature as well. He seemed particularly interested in works created during or after wars, studying how humans processed their darkest experiences through creativity. In the Commonwealth, he explained, art celebrates harmony, but human art often comes from discord. You create beauty from pain. It's another paradox I need to study. Finally, his terminal indicated that the transport was approaching. They walked back to the dormitory so Jaiho could collect his bags. The rain had stopped, and the sun was trying to break through the clouds. In room 407, Do-hyun helped Jaiho pack the last of his belongings. The meditation crystal went into its special case, and the terminal folded into a compact travel form. The room looked strangely empty with Jaiho's things removed. I left something for you, Jaiho said, pointing to Do-hyun's desk. A small crystal sat there, glowing with a gentle light. It's a teaching crystal from my world. It contains stories about how my people achieved peace. Perhaps humans can learn from us, just as we need to learn from you. Do-hyun picked up the crystal carefully. Will you come back someday? Jaiho's large eyes seemed to soften. Perhaps. When I'm ready, when I can understand your complexity without fearing it. Humans are the most challenging species the Commonwealth has ever encountered, but also, perhaps, the most important to understand. The transport's arrival was announced by a soft chime from Jaiho's terminal. Outside, a sleek vehicle waited to take him to the embassy. Before leaving, Jaiho turned to face his friends one last time. Thank you, he said, for trying to help me understand. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. But remember, I'm not leaving because I think humans are evil. I'm leaving because you are more complex than anything my education prepared me for. You are dangerous, yes, but not in the way I first thought. You are dangerous because you are unpredictable, capable of both the highest good and the deepest evil, often in the same moment. He bowed deeply, and they returned the gesture. Then Jaiho walked to the transport, carrying with him a library of human knowledge and a new understanding of how complicated peace could be. The Commonwealth Embassy gleamed in the morning sunlight, its crystal architecture standing out among Seoul's modern buildings. Jaiho sat in a waiting room, his bags packed beside him, while embassy officials processed his departure papers. His terminal displayed messages from Professor Hanbin, Yu Jin, and Do-hyun. They had sent him more information about human history, not about wars this time, but about peace treaties, international cooperation, and scientific achievements. Jaiho saved everything to study later. An embassy official, Tadwan, entered the room. Unlike Jaiho, whose blue skin marked him as being from the outer regions of Commonwealth space, Ta-One's silver-tinted skin identified him as being from the Commonwealth's capital worlds. "Your ship is ready," Ta-One said. "But before you leave, someone wants to speak with you." The door opened again, and an elderly woman entered, walking slowly with a cane. Do-hyun followed behind her, looking nervous. "Jaiho, this is my grandmother," Do-hyun said. "She insisted on meeting you before you left." The old woman sat down across from Jaiho. Her face showed deep wrinkles, and her eyes held a wisdom that made Jaiho's translator hum with effort to capture the nuances of her expression. "Do-hyun told me about your reaction to learning our history," she said softly. "I understand. I lived through war myself. I saw terrible things." Jaiho leaned forward, his large eyes focused on her face. "How do you live with those memories?" She smiled gently. "By working to create new ones. After the war, I helped build schools. I taught children. I showed them that there are better ways to solve problems than fighting. But the weapons still exist," Jaiho said. "The knowledge of how to make them remains." "Yes," she agreed. "And every day, we choose not to use them. That choice, that conscious decision to be better than our past, that is what makes us human." Jaiho's meditation crystal pulsed with a new rhythm, responding to his changing thoughts. "In the Commonwealth, peace is our natural state. We don't have to choose it every day." "Then perhaps we have something to teach you too," the old woman said. "Peace means more when it's a choice. When you know the cost of war but choose peace anyway, that's true strength." She reached into her bag and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a destroyed city being rebuilt, with people working together among the ruins. "This was my hometown after the war," she explained. "Look closely. What do you see?" Jaiho studied the image. "People building new structures." "Yes, but look at their faces," she insisted. "They're smiling. Even after losing everything, they could smile and work together. Humans don't just survive, Jaiho. We rebuild. We hope. We choose to be better." Do-hyun sat next to his grandmother. "That's why she wanted to meet you. She says running away from our history isn't the answer. Understanding it is." Jaiho looked at his packed bags, then back at the photograph. "But your history frightens me. The speed of your development, your capacity for violence." "And for love," the old woman interrupted. "Don't forget that part. For every weapon we created, we also created medicine. For every war we fought, we also made peace. Your people achieved peace through evolution. We achieve it every day through choice." Tai-One cleared his throat politely. "The ship is waiting, Jaiho." Jaiho stood up slowly. "Thank you for sharing your story. I think I understand something now that wasn't in any of my research." "What's that?" Do-hyun asked. "The Commonwealth achieved peace by removing conflict. Humans are achieving peace while acknowledging conflict. Perhaps your way is harder, but stronger." The old woman smiled. "Now you're beginning to understand." Jaiho picked up his bags, but paused before leaving. "Do-hyun, could you help me with one last thing?" "Of course. I need to send a final message to the Commonwealth Education Council. Would you and your grandmother be willing to share more of your stories? I think we've been studying humans the wrong way." For the next hour, Jaiho recorded their conversations. The old woman spoke about living through war and choosing peace. Do-hyun shared his generation's perspective on inheriting a complex world. Jaiho asked questions he wouldn't have thought to ask just days ago. Finally, he composed his message. "To the Commonwealth Education Council. I still request to end my study period on Earth, but not for the reasons I initially stated. I am leaving not because humans are too dangerous to study, but because our current approach to studying them is insufficient. We have been examining human history looking for patterns similar to our own development. This is a mistake. Humans developed differently. They face challenges daily that our species resolved millennia ago. Their peace is not a state of being, but a continuous choice. I recommend a complete revision of our Earth Studies program. We need observers trained not just in history and culture, but in understanding complexity and contradiction. Humans are not simply a violent species learning peace, nor a peaceful species with violent tendencies. They are a species that contains all possibilities and chooses their path every day. My successors should be prepared not just to study humans, but to learn from them. Their way of achieving peace, through conscious choice rather than natural development, may offer insights our own society has never considered. Attached are recordings of my final interviews on Earth. They demonstrate what I have come to understand. Humanity's greatest strength is not their technology, their adaptability, or even their capacity for both creation and destruction. It is their ability to know the worst of what they can be, and still choose to be better. Respectfully, Jai-Ho. He sent the message and turned to say goodbye. The old woman hugged him, a human gesture his cultural training had covered, but hadn't prepared him for the emotional impact of experiencing. "Come back when you're ready," she said. "We'll have more stories to share." As Jai-Ho boarded the ship that would take him home, he looked back at Earth through the viewport. From space, it looked peaceful, but he now knew its true nature. A world where peace wasn't a given, but a gift its people gave themselves every day. His meditation crystal glowed with a new pattern, one that matched the complexity of what he had learned. He hadn't failed in his mission to study humans. He had simply discovered that they needed to be studied in a new way. The ship lifted off, carrying him away from Earth, but Jai-Ho knew he would return. Next time, he would come not just to study humans, but to learn from them. After all, what greater testament to the power of peace could there be than a species that had seen the depths of war and still chose another path? As Earth disappeared behind him, Jai-Ho began organizing all the materials he had collected. These would form the foundation of a new approach to understanding humanity, not as a problem to be solved, but as a paradox to be appreciated. In their contradictions lay their strength, and in their choices lay their hope. The ship entered hyperspace, and Jai-Ho settled in for the journey home, knowing he carried with him not just knowledge of humanity's past, but insights into their potential future, a future they chose, every day, to make better than their past.